Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're taking a really close look at a group that didn't just top the charts. They literally engineered the exact template for modern pop music as we know it today. We're going to examine the timeline and, honestly, the unbelievable cultural impact of a trio that just completely rewrote the rules of the entire industry. So get ready, because we are diving into the numbers behind the royalty. Okay, let's set the stakes right out of the gate because, well, context is everything, right? When we think of 1964, history usually points straight to the British invasion. We all kind of think of the Beatles as the unrivaled kings of the charts. But the data tells a much more thrilling story. Because right there in late 1964, there was an act matching the Beatles blow for blow, just entirely neck and neck for American #1 hits. And get this, they weren't from Liverpool. They were from Detroit. Okay, let's dive right into this. The group rivaling the biggest band in the world was, of course, the Supremes. Just take in that classic 1960s aesthetic that made them Motown Records' undisputed premier act. Through their visual branding, their absolutely unmatched vocal harmony, and just sheer star power, Diana Ross, Mary Wilson, and Florence Ballard became the absolute gold standard for what a pop group could, and really should, look and sound like. All right, moving into Section 1, Breakthrough and Ed Sullivan. To really grasp their explosive rise, we have to start on December 27th, 1964. Picture this, stepping onto the stage of the Ed Sullivan Show, broadcasting in stark black and white to literally millions of living rooms across the country. Diana Ross, Mary Wilson, and Florence Ballard appeared in these simple, impossibly elegant dresses with completely flawless, matching buffet hairstyles. They performed Come See About Me, which, by the way, was a track that had just hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 a week prior. This wasn't just a performance, it was a coronation. They completely captured the entire country's attention in a matter of minutes. Which brings us to Section 2, Global Chart Dominance. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how cultural heat translates into hard data. Just look at this chronological grouping, it's honestly almost unbelievable. October 64, Where Did Our Love Go? That same exact month, Baby Love. Then by November, Come See About Me takes the crown. Then, just a few short months later, in February 65, Stop in the Name of Love hits, followed rapidly by Back in My Arms Again in May. 5 consecutive explosive #1 hits. The momentum here is totally unmatched. It's this rapid-fire run of success that literally reshaped the entire music industry in less than a year's time. Which brings us to this incredibly important number right here, 12. That is the massive total of United States #1 singles that the Supremes achieved during their run. 12. In an era that was just crowded with legendary rock bands, iconic solo artists, and, the entire British invasion, these 3 women from Detroit secured the top spot in America a dozen times. It's a statistical feat that absolutely solidifies their place as chart royalty. No question about it. Now, what's really fascinating about this is how it proves their dominance wasn't just an American phenomenon. If we follow the translation of these hits across the Atlantic, we see that Baby Love wasn't just a U.S. #1. It simultaneously conquered the UK, hitting #1 over there as well, while charting at number 15 in Germany. And then later on, You Can't Hurry Love in 1966 mirrors the same transatlantic power, topping the U.S. charts and peaking at a massive #3 in the UK. So they were a massive global export, basically proving that the Motown sound was a universal language. All right, let's shift gears to Section 3, Eras, Names, and Legacy. So as we move into the late 60s, the dynamics of the music industry, and honestly the group itself, really began to shift. By 1967, Motown president Berry Gordy made a highly calculated strategic decision. On one hand, you've got the original, the Supremes, right? This egalitarian trio that fought their way to the very top as a completely unified front. But on the other, you have this 1967 rebrand, Diana Ross and the Supremes. And this move fundamentally centered Diana Ross as the focal point, the main star of the act. It really changed public perception and set the stage for the next era of their careers. It's a perfect reflection of how record labels were just starting to learn how to market individual star power. But interestingly enough, shifting the brand didn't disrupt their commercial viability one bit. We talk a lot about hit singles, sure, but in the music business, moving millions of full-length albums, that is the ultimate metric for true industry titans. And their mid-60s peak album, Supremes A Go-Go, hit #1 on the US longplay charts and number 15 in the UK. So they weren't just some singles act making catchy 3-minute tunes. Their longplay data is just as formidable. So the really crucial point to take away here is that even as the decade was closing out, their power remained totally intact. In late 1969, they released Someday We'll Be Together. Now, this track would go on to become their 12th and final U.S. #1 hit. It serves as this incredibly poignant climax to an unprecedented 1960s run. I mean, Someday We'll Be Together, it's such a fitting, almost prophetic title that beautifully bookends their golden era at the very top of the Billboard charts. The structural transition finally completes in 1970. Diana Ross embarks on her massively successful solo career, Jean Terrell steps in, and the marquee simply reverts back to the Supremes. And while they definitely continued to chart after this pivot officially closes the book on the specific timeline that basically altered music history forever. Which leaves us with this one big thing to think about as we wrap up today's explainer. The data clearly shows us they matched the Beatles. The charts show us they literally conquered the world. They completely defined the 1960s. But looking at the tight choreography, the synchronized branding, and the centering of a breakout solo star, you have to wonder how much of the exact template for today's modern pop industry was engineered by these three women from Motown. It's a fascinating question, isn't it? Thanks so much for exploring it with me today.